thank you for being here. And let me just begin by asking, how many of you were here for Hillary or Jocelyn or both lectures? Any of you? Okay, a couple? Okay, because I may be repeating a few things that they said, and so I just wanted to make sure, but if you're pretty much all new, but welcome again, then hopefully it will not be too much of a repeat for you. So I am Heather Willoughby, and I've lived in Korea for many years. I first came to Korea in 1986. So a long time ago, before you were born, before you were born, even before a lot of my students. I work at Ewha Women's University in Seoul, and even before most of my students. And I lived here for a year and a half then. And I'll tell you a little bit more in a moment how I became introduced to Pansori, because I'll tell you a little bit of a history of Pansori. But at that time, I saw a concert of a Pansori singer. And I'd been a singer since I was young, and I'd been to hundreds of concerts. I love music. But when I saw this Pansori concert, I'd never seen anything like it. It just really astounded me. As I said, I'll give you a few more details about that in a moment. But then I came back to Korea to study Korean music, not so much as a performer, but as an academic. And so I wrote my PhD about Pansori. And I've really loved it ever since. And then about 14 years ago, I came to Ewha to become a professor, and I've been here ever since. So I've been in Korea altogether for about 17 years of my life. So it's a good place to be, and hope you're enjoying it also. So who has heard of Pansori before? Okay, good. And how do you know about it?
Just I do Samonori, and so
Oh.
I'm aware of other different.
Nice. Excellent. Okay. Anybody else? I'm sure maybe a few of our Koreans. You know,
We've heard of many times.
right. You know, at the holidays, it's always on television, something like that. All right. Well, let's go into it here. Nope, I keep hitting the wrong button. Sorry. Let's try that again. All right. So, stepping back just a little bit, there's different divisions of Korean music, and I'm not going to talk about these too much, but we have kind of elite music or court music traditionally, and so that included things like ritual music, banquet music, military music, and that was all done by or for, at least again, the elite, for the kings, for the upper society. And then from that you had sort of instrumental music, solo music, and then you also had vocal music and things like kagok, shijo, kasa. These are all poetic forms, and they're very refined. And what we're going to listen to today is not as refined. It's a very different type of music. And that's because it's folk music. And the music that came out of the folk had a very different sort of aesthetic. And so there's music that was for work, so something like samonori. That's actually a new form of drumming that came out of pungmul. And pungmul was farmers' music. It was to keep the workers moving and excited and keep them working. But you also had folk music that was vocal music that was also for work. Things like songs that were for hauling in fish from boats, or again when they're harvesting rice, something like that. And then you had music that was for entertainment. And so again, you have instrumental music and vocal music. And you have a lot of different regional folk songs. And so in the original provinces of Korea, including all of North Korea, kind of each area, each region has its own specific sound to it, own way of singing and performing. And Pansori originally comes from the southernmost portions of Korea in what's called Chola-namdo, or the South Chola province. So in 1963, a group of scholars and musicians, performers, they all got together and they wanted to ask this question and answer the question, what is Pansori? So they debated for a while, for 3 days in fact. They thought, well, is it narration? Okay, there is no narration. Is it poetry? There's definitely poetry. There's song, there's some singing. But is it opera? Well, after 3 days of arguing, they decided this. Pansori, pansori 있다. Pansori is pansori. It's not any one of these things. It's not just one of them. It's all of these things. So I'm going to play a little video clip for you, and then you have a test. And the test is, what is Pansori? I want you to listen and see, what do you hear? What do you see? And how would you describe those things? So let's see. Oh, I did it again. I like lots of different buttons. Let's see if I can get the right button now. Okay, let's see if we can get this to play here. Let's see, somewhere. Okay, I'll show you one more here, so that then now you can see the drummer as well. All right, so welcome. So what do you hear? What do you see? How would you describe what Pansori is? 어떻게?
온갖 비단이 나온다.
네?
네, 그런 거 들었어요.
그렇죠, 그렇죠. This is kind of an important point. The way that the voice is used is actually very important. We're going to talk a lot more about that as well. Okay. Anyone else? What do you hear? What do you see?
You say, only one woman, he tried to say everything using his body.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. So we have how many performers?
2.
Right, 2. Okay. So we have the singer and the drummer. Okay, this is really important. And there are other ways of performing Pansori too on a stage and things, and I'll get to that later. But we're talking about traditional Pansori for now. And so we've got a singer, and male or female, and a drummer. And sometimes you have female drummers, but it's very rare. Even today, it's still almost always male drummers. And so what did you said that the female performer is trying to tell everything just with her voice and with her body. So describe some of those things to me again. What did you see her doing?
She sing with her breathe and everything.
Right. And this is why Pansori, the first time I saw it, just astounded me, because it takes so much energy. And any type of singing does. As I said, I've been a singer since I was young, and I sang both opera sort of style as well as American style folk music. But again, I'd never seen something like this that just took your whole body to produce, from head to toe, so much energy in it. And so you're right that she's singing with her soul. What else do you see? So what kind of props maybe does she have? She's using her body. Anything else?
Feeling and expression, I can see.
Right. Okay. And emotional expression is really important again. So this is what I ended up studying when I did my dissertation research. Is I was fascinated by the idea of emotional expression, and in particular, I ended up studying the ideas of sorrow, or what in Korean is called han, which is really deep-seated resentment, sorrow. And
without understanding the language, I can see the feeling or expression.
right. And so again, one of the great things about Pansori is that there's a whole gamut of emotion that is expressed. So you see her at one point, she's down on the ground and kind of expressing that sorrow. And at other times, it's funny. Other times, it's happy, it's sad, there's love stories, there's a little bit of everything in it. And so the emotion and the way that is expressed, as you said, even if you can't understand the words, you still can understand emotion. So again, as promised, I'll tell you a little bit of what happened. So in 1986, when I first came to Korea here, that was a time when there was a lot of political demonstrations. And before the demonstrations, many times there were musical performances. And it was, again, just to kind of get the students riled up and excited about their demonstrations. And so somebody had invited me to a university, actually not too far from here, and it was kind of this pre-musical rally. Or musical rally before the rally, and getting people excited for what was to come, but also for the performance itself. And so we came into the studio auditorium, and I sat down kind of near the back, and a woman got on stage, and I'd only been in Korea probably about 3 or 4 months by that time, so I didn't understand Korean very well. And the language of Pansori is very hard besides, which I'll also talk about. But just her energy was astounding to me. And I was really drawn to her. And so I walked to the edge of the stage and walked down so that I could be as close as possible to her. So I was maybe about as far away as from you. And I was just mesmerized by what she was singing and what she was doing, but that energy that she had. And afterwards, I was able to meet the performer. And her name was Kim So-hee, and she is perhaps one of the most famous Pansori singers ever, and I'll show you a picture of her a little bit later. And it was amazing to me that I was able to meet this woman and to have this connection with her, and I'll tell you more about that connection also. But it changed my life. As I said, I then ended up coming back and studying more Korean music, and this is what I do for a living now, is talk about Pansori. All right, so going back, what is Pansori? Well, Pan means a site or stage or gathering place, and Sori means sound. And it's not always been called Pansori. Some people will just call it Chang, which is singing, but a particular kind of singing. So it goes by different names. But basically a song that is sung in a gathering place. And so originally I told you that it was sort of from the southern portion of Korea in Cholanamdo, and it would be sung in the open marketplaces. And that helped to develop the voice a little bit because they were, singing louder than the cows walking by or something like that. And so a particular voice was generated from that. So it is, in fact, narrative storytelling. And as we said, there is a solo singer, which is called a gwangdae. In the past, not many people call them that anymore, but you could call it a gwangdae, which is a general term for an entertainer, or a sorigun, a person who does song. And there's three things that they do. They sing, they narrate, and the narrate is dramatic speech. And then they do these simple movements with their fan. So, sometimes they'll just be holding the fan like this, and then other times they'll open it in sort of a dramatic way, and they'll use it sometimes to point to something, or again, if we open it up, they might use it as if it's a book. Or sometimes in one of the stories, they're trying to open up some gourds, and so it can be used as a saw. But basically, it's very simple sorts of staging. You don't have much else besides a fan and the singer. And the second very important person is the kosu, or the drummer. And he's going to be using this double-headed drum, a barrel drum, and he uses his hand on one side and with the te, the stick, on the other, and it makes very big resonating sounds. But he does something else that's really important, and he does what's called chuimse. So what is chuimse? Any of you know? Chota, right. So, usu, urshigo, ui. And so this is the kind of, we call them in English, words of encouragement. It's ways of keeping the audience going and excited. And so I think just for a moment, I'm going to go back and play a bit of this again. I want you to really watch the drummer. I know he's not out there very long, but watch him and listen to him, because he's going to do that chuimse. And he also tries to get the audience to join him. So all of that's chuimse. All right, so as you can see, all of that he does, and a really good kosu is going to keep that up. And I've also seen this particular drummer. He's really great. He'll stop in the middle of a song and just say, look at the audience, like, nope, that's not good enough. You've got to do more chuimse. And so he'll teach them how to do it. And so he'll maybe point with his hand up, and when he does that, that's urshigo, or when it's down, it's chota. And so he teaches people how to do it. And there's a number of words that are used for that. And it's just like, way to go, good job, keep it up, things like that. It's really fun. And so I actually do that for my students also sometimes. And most Koreans think it's a little funny, but I often say, chota. It's good fun. So let's move ahead here. So the only other things, as we said, we've got a fan, the chuimse, and then usually behind the singer will be some sort of screen, and they'll stand on a mat. But that's, again, kind of modern trappings. In the past, they didn't always have that when they were out in the fields or such. So again, for some of you that attended especially Jocelyn's talk, this is going to be a bit of a review. But I want to talk about how Pansori is put together. Basically, what you have is you have these songs, but there are set, not melodies so much, but if you know about Western music, you know about scales. And a melodic mode, or a jo, is sort of like a scale, but it's almost more like a raga, if you know anything about Indian music. I don't know if you're of Indian descent, or, but a raga has more than just a scale of notes. It has other meaning. It may be color, or a raga may be performed at a certain time of day. And it's imbued with more than just a simple set of notes. It has meaning to it. It has emotion. So this is a little long, but I'm going to go ahead and read this. It says, the word jo, which appears in the names of such Pansori singing modes as Pyeongjo, Ujo, Kyeomyeonjo, incorporates the sense of the Western musical concept of mode and scale, in addition to aesthetic effect of key. Each jo, moreover, is attributed to certain impressionistic qualities which rise from the singer's vocal techniques and stage presence. The jo, therefore, is an arrangement of selected musical notes, usually 5, which are used to create melodies. The selection and arrangement of those notes is said to impart characteristics to the melodies that are based on them, and therefore suggestive, effective distinctions among jo expressed in such impressionistic terms as brave or harmonious or poignant. And so there are these different jos, and sometimes the jos may be just when a nobleman enters, you'll use a certain kind of jo. Or if it is supposed to be a happy thing, then maybe you'll use this Kyeomyeonjo. Or if it's very strong, you'll use the Pyeongjo. Or if it's a little more serious, you'll use the Ujo. And so these are combined then with, okay, keep moving. No? Yes? No? No, maybe? Okay, that can't be the end. Let's go back and see if we can get this to... Okay. So the second thing is that you have 네, 네. 알겠습니다. So the melodic modes then are combined with rhythmic modes. And there are a number of different rhythmic modes that start from very slow to very, very fast. And each of these modes is combined, it's basically set. But if we have like this jungjungmori, we'll see if this will play. So this is made out of 12 beats. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 네, 저기 이미 했지만 그 100% 했는데. 어허. 네. 고맙습니다. Okay. So, now we're back. So each of the modes, some of the modes are, there's one that's called an irregular mode, and that's at 5 beats, and so it might go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or it might be 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. And then we've got some that are of 8 beats or some 12, so it can change, but the reality is even though it's set, so like a jungjung mori might be, if I had my drum here, hap jung, no, hop. Oh boy, it's been a while, sorry. Hop, kum, tak, tak, kum, tak, tak. Hop, kum, tak, tak, kum, tak, tak. So those 12 beats. But the drummer will never play it exactly the same every time. If they did that, they'd be a really bad drummer. And so they're just, what they'll do is they'll keep that beat, but they will emphasize different things depending on what the singer is singing and the rhythmic pattern that they are in, so that the movement keeps going. So I'll play the slow one for you, and then the fast, and you can kind of hear the difference between those. Oh yeah, that's louder now. Is that too much? You can feel this quite slow. All right, so what kind of emotions come out from something like that? What do you feel? What do you hear? Okay, right? Because so what do you think makes it sad?
A little slowly tempo, and then his voice.
Right, yeah, exactly. This really raspy sound, and I'm going to talk more about that raspiness in a minute too. I know I keep leading up saying there's more to come, woohoo! But right, this is kind of a sad thing, and a lot of it has to do with the that tempo of being nice and slow, and then the way he's using his voice as well. Let's compare that with something that's fast. So I want you to keep that sound in mind. I'm actually going to give you kind of two presentations today, at least part of a second one, and I'm going to talk about that particular type of singing in a few minutes here, or an hour from now, whichever. We'll see how long it goes. But so what do you get from that faster pace instead?
Very funny sounds.
Right. Yeah. This is a lot faster, and it makes kind of humorous, and really gets your foot tapping, your heart beating there. And so what happens in a Pansori tale then is that we combine these things together. And so at one point maybe the singer is singing very quickly, and then there will be some narration in between, and then they'll sing another song, and it will be slower, and then maybe a medium pace. And so you just intertwine these things. It's very rare that you will have like a very long stretch that's all slow. And almost never will you have a very long stretch that's all fast. But instead you interweave them together. And so the jo changes occasionally, and the rhythmic mode, or what's called the changdan, that changes. And it keeps your interest because there's a nice flow. There's a very real pace to this, and it's conscientious and it's thought out. All right, so let's step back and talk a little bit about Pansori and where it came from and how it got developed. So because it is a type of folk music, then we don't have a lot of written history because the folk were not literate. And so we don't really know when Pansori began. We do know when it began to be written about by the elite and when the elite became interested in it. But it was really based on some folk songs and became a way of folk song singing. So some people believe that it came from the performance practices of itinerant musicians. And if you know anything about English or Italian or French bards, then basically what the bards did was they would go from town to town and they would share the news of the kingdom. And so they really were pre-internet dates by a couple hundred years or 1,000 years. Then these itinerant musicians would go from town to town entertaining. And so a lot of people believe that that's really where Pansori came from. A second idea is that the rituals of shamans also had a great influence, and that the songs came from the shamans themselves. Well, I kind of believe that it's a combination of those things. And the reason is, one of the things that makes sense about that is in the southern region, most of the shamans were women. And the itinerant entertainers were often their sons or husbands. And so they're influencing one another. And so it made a lot of sense then that these things are being combined. But many times with the shamans in their rituals, it is a type of storytelling. And that as the spirits descend upon them and they take on that spirit maybe of a general, then the general speaks and tells a story. And so there are portions of the music then that comes from these shamans. And so this is another long quote, but once again one that I'm going to read here. It says, "While most of the early performers of Pansori appear to have emerged from the low-born culture of the Chola province, the material of their art came not only from the shaman culture, but also from the tradition of the professional variety entertainers," again, these were called kwangde, "who preceded them, and the general folk culture of their southwestern region. From shaman narrative songs, they gained the rhythmic patterns of drumming and singing, techniques of vocalization, interweaving of sung and spoken passages, and the interpolation of songs from other traditions. From solo actors of farce and storytellers, they inherited their skills of characterization, improvisation, narrative development, and audience management. And the folk culture around them was an abundant source of materials as myths and legends, stories, ballads, laments, and work songs." So I'm going to break that apart again just a little bit more. And so we notice that the voice here, and at some points very harsh and raspy. And so that's kind of coming from the shamans. And this idea of interweaving of the narration as well as the song and going back and forth between those. And it also says the interpolation of songs from other traditions. Well, as I said, that there's folk songs all over Korea, work songs, and songs for joy, songs for entertainment. And Pansori began to bring some of those folk songs into the storytelling as well. And so in one story you have a gentleman who is traveling, and he passes by some farmers. And then suddenly in the middle of this Pansori piece, you have a very well-known, just a little snippet, but nonetheless a very well-known folk song about harvesting rice. And so that got brought into the larger Pansori tales. And so then we also have this idea from the kwangde, or these actors, things like improvisation. Pansori was originally all improvised, and I'm going to tell you more about the stories in a moment again. But really, it was mostly improvised and then changed a bit, so now it's a lot more set. But also this idea of audience management, As I said, you have the drummer who's trying to get the audience to join in. And that was part of what came then also from these entertainers. So really a combination of things. So again, originally, Pansori was sung by the lower class and for the lower classes, out in the villages, out in the farming communities. But at some point, then they began singing for the upper class, or for the yangban. And as the yangban became more interested in the art, a couple things happened. It began to change for several reasons. One is that the literati, or the yangban, then began writing down the stories. And that's a good thing because that's when we have records of it. And so the first one is in the 1700s. And so it's good because we have a record of it, but things also began to change a little bit also. And the yangban began influencing it. And what happened then was it became much more sophisticated. And so the yangban, some of them actually became Pansori singers themselves, or at least teachers. And as they did so, they brought in Chinese poetry. They brought in language, again, that was much more sophisticated, much more elite. And that ended up changing things. And so the other thing that ended up happening was that there used to be probably a lot of stories that were told in Pansori, especially because it was improvised. I could make up any type of story that I wanted. But what happens eventually is when the yangban became interested in this, some of these stories were a little crude. And so the yangban didn't like that so much. And so they kind of started getting rid of some of those more crude stories. And eventually then it comes down to 5 primary stories that are told that back up this idea of these Confucian ideals. That's what the yangban wanted. They wanted them to be didactic, or that is that they taught a moral lesson. So what we end up with then are primarily 5 stories that are told. And so each of them, as I said, have some sort of Confucian moral to explain in them. And so we have the story of Chunyang, Shimchang, Humbuga, Sugunga, and Chokpyoga. So who can tell me, Chunyang is probably the most famous. What is the story of Chunyang? Do you want to tell us a little bit about Chunyang? You look very excited.
Shinyoung is a love story.
Yes.
Girl and boy.
Mm-hmm. And so this is right, this love story, but it's fascinating because it's a story about the differences in class. And so she's from the lower class. Her mother is a kiseng, which is the equivalent of a geisha, an entertaining woman. And even though she herself was not a kiseng, her mother was, and so she was supposedly born to this lower class. But and her name is Chunyang. And Im Myong-nong, which is really hard to say. So in the Pansori Tale, they often call him Idoryong. That's much easier to say, so I'll call him Idoryong. And he is from the upper class. His father, in fact, is the magistrate or the governor of Namwon province. And I was just down in Namwon recently. Beautiful, you should go. And I won't go into the details of all of these so much, but I will tell you a little bit more about this one. And so it's pretty fascinating because, again, you have these classes differences. But Chunyang is outside enjoying a beautiful day. In fact, the 5th day of the 5th month, which is May Day in Korea. And so she's out on a swing enjoying herself. And Lee Do-ryung is a young man that is diligently studying for his exams, and he has to take the civil exam so that he too can become a government worker. And so he's studying, but he gets really tired and it's like, I can't take this anymore. And so he goes out into what's called Kwanghalyu. It's this beautiful garden park area. And in the distance he sees Chunyoung. And he thinks, I'd like to meet her. And so he sends his servant off to try to fetch her. And this is what he says. He says, 그때요 도련님이 광한류 구경 나가셨다가 춘향 모습을 보고 anyhow, 시켜라 팡 잡은 문득 춘향 부르러 건너간다. 맵시 있는 처방자 대도 곤 처방자 얀잎봉지 눌러 쓰고 충충거리고 건너갈제 초약도 더 푹 찌어 양괴 앉은 적괴거리 특저 후여 전알려 보고 서왕모 여지 안에 편지 찬든 종족같이 이리저리 건너가 주냥추잔하는 것 바르르르 달려들어 안하였다 춘향아. Good. That's about all I can do, so now I need to drink some water. So they eventually become lovers. In some stories, depending on how it's told, they marry. In some of the stories, they're together for a year, some maybe 3 years. But Chunyoung's mother knows about Lee Do-ryung, but his family does not know about her. And eventually, his father has to go off to Seoul, to Hanyang, actually, as it was called at the time, to the capital. And so Lee Do-ryung has to leave also. And in the interim, what happens is a new magistrate, a new governor comes into town, and he's really an awful guy. I mean, he's really salacious. And so he calls together all of the kiseng in the area because he's heard about the reputation of Chunyoung. Not only is she beautiful, but she can dance. She writes poetry. She plays the kayagam. She does calligraphy. She is just the Renaissance woman. She's really can do it all. And he's heard about her, and so he wants her for himself. But she basically pushes him aside and says, no, I'm not a kiseng, and besides that, I am dedicated to Lee Do-ryung. And she says to him even, can a woman serve 2 masters? I cannot. So he imprisons her, and then he beats her, and imprisons her a little bit longer. And finally, he decides he's going to be having this big birthday bash. And what better way to celebrate than to kill Chunyoung? So that's his plan. And so she's supposed to come out, and there's going to be a public execution. And all of this time that this has been going on, that the magistrate has been pursuing Chunyoung, Lee Do-ryung has been up in the capital studying for exams, and he finally passes. And he becomes a secret emissary for the king because he passed number 1. And so he comes back down to Namwon area, but he's dressed like a beggar. But somehow he gets into this party, and there's all the elite around there, and he challenges them to a poetry contest. And they think, oh, this old beggar, he doesn't know anything. And yet the poetry he writes is exquisite. And then they begin getting a little more nervous, thinking, who is this guy? And eventually he reveals himself as the emissary of the king. And they're all wiped out and go to prison. And Lee Do-ryung is reunited happily with Chunyoung. But there's a little catch, and this is the part that is a modern feminist I get a little irritated about, but I try to contain myself. And that is that even though she's been beaten, imprisoned while he's been feasting up in Seoul, then Chunyong is brought before him, and he says to her, I understand that, that this older magistrate here has been, going after your favor, and I heard that you were not true to your husband. And she says, no, I've always been true to him. And basically he's like, well, we'll prove it. And she brings out a gift, a comb that he had given to her, and as proof that she has remained true to him. And then he shows her a ring, and everybody realizes it's him, and they're all happy, and that's, then we dance, and her mother does a very exciting dance at the end there, and thus the Pansori is over. Well, that Pansori tale, if sung from its beginning to end, with all of it intact, that's 8 hours long. That story that I just told you in 6-7 minutes, yeah, you ready for 8 hours of it? Okay, here we go. Oh, wait, no. All right. But obviously, really the basis of this is about loyalty. It's about her loyalty. It's about her chastity and of her being pure and good. The other stories are likewise very well known to all Koreans. The story of Shimcheong is also remarkably about a woman. And in this case, a young woman whose father is blind. She sacrifices herself for him. And in the end, she is exalted. Also, she marries a king. And she has a big party for all the blind people of the country, and is ultimately reunited with her father. And so it's about her sacrifice, her filial piety, and that means her family obligations, and she is true to him. In the song of Hungbo, you have an older brother and a younger brother, and again, the older brother is just a rotten guy, really, you just don't get much worse than him. And then you have this very nice younger brother. And the younger brother finds a bird, a swallow, and its leg is broken. And so he fixes that leg and takes very good care of that bird. And it flies off and comes back the next spring and brings him some seeds. Well, the little part that I forgot is that awful older brother. He's kicked the younger brother out of the house, and the younger brother has like 18 children, and so he's destitute, he has nothing, and the older brother was supposed to share with him. Really, that was the idea. But the older brother is very greedy. Well, when the swallow brings these seeds back and he plants them, get these huge gourds, and as I said, sometimes you use your fan as a saw, and so eventually, you open up those gourds, and what do you get? Well, out pours money. Out pours these little goblins that build him a house, and silk, and all sorts of beautiful things. And so eventually then the younger brother has this wealth, and he's very happy to share it with his older brother. But the older brother is a little devious here, and so he goes and he finds a swallow, and he thinks, this one doesn't have a broken leg. Well, I can fix that. And so he breaks the leg. Not nice, not nice. And then he heals it, and the bird eventually flies off. And then the bird comes and brings him some seeds for gourds, and he grows those gourds, and it's like, woohoo, I'm going to open that up and see what I get. But instead, again, outpours like demons, and it's just a disaster, really bad stuff. And so he loses everything he's got. But again, because of the generosity of the younger brother, then he eventually has all that he needs. The story of the underwater palace is one of the most humorous stories, and it has all sorts of characters in it. You have tortoises, you have rabbits. It's all about trying to get the liver. I was going to say kidney. No, not there. Liver of the rabbit because the underwater king needs that for medicine, and it's very, very humorous story. And least performed, but also very important here, is Chokbokga, or the Song of Red Cliff, and that actually comes from a Chinese story about a very famous battle. All right, so as I said, these stories, if told in their entirety, are anywhere from about 5 hours to 8 hours, but rarely do you actually get them performed in their entirety. So now I want to step to another thing and talk a little bit about the training of a Pansori singer. Things have changed dramatically over the last 50 years, but traditionally, Pansori singers really, it was a family orientation. I'd mentioned before that shamans often were women, and their sons or husbands were their musical accompanists. And so really all of this music was a family affair, and that shamans were traditionally passed down in the family, and so the music was as well. And the idea was that you learned the repertoire from a master. People did not write down the text. I would sing something and you would repeat it, and until you memorized that entire 8 hours worth of singing. I should also say, though, I'd mentioned before that things were originally improvised. And so you could kind of think of it about a skeleton. Maybe you had the skeleton story of Chunyang, but you as the master singer will add your own parts to it. You add the guts, you add the flesh to it so that it becomes your own type of story. And that's sort of how things were then passed down from one to another. But one master might have a different way of doing it than my master. And so I would learn one type of way of singing it, whereas you might learn a slightly different version, and you might learn a little bit different version. So I'm going to learn to imitate and replicate the sounds of the master. But what's also important is that if you really want to become a master singer, you not only memorize it and sing it in the style of the master, but you become a master yourself by having your own characterization, by really taking that music on by yourself. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Japanese kabuki, but in kabuki, you follow your master exactly. I mean, if your master lifts their eyebrow at a certain point in the song, you learn to lift your eyebrow exactly like that. And of course, everybody has a little bit of their own style, but it's very stylistic. And you really learn from a master and replicate it precisely. But in Pansori, you've got to become your own master. You have your own style. So I'm going to tell you about, I'll go backwards a little bit here. At the beginning of the lecture, I showed you a video of a woman singing, and her name is Lee Ju-eun. And she's alive today, obviously, and still singing. And her teacher was Shin Young-hee, or is Shin Young-hee. And Shin Young-hee is now designated by the government as an intangible cultural heritage holder. And so it's a special government designation that says she is a bona fide master of Pansori. And she was taught by Kim So-hee, who was the first government designated intangible cultural property holder of Pansori. And if you recall, I told you that the first singer that I ever saw was Kim So-hee. And so again, I find it rather remarkable that I met Kim So-hee in 1986, and then in 1999, I randomly met a Pansori teacher who was Lee Ju-eun, who is the direct line from Kim So-hee, and will in fact become the next intangible cultural property holder if and when Shin Young-hee dies, but inshallah that will not be soon. So Kim So-hee then studied from Song Man-gap, who studied from Song Yu-ryong, who studied from Song Kwang-nok, who was the brother of Song Hoon-nok. And so you can see that this lineage, and all of these were related to one another. And then Kim So-hee was not directly related from Songman-gap, but she learned from two different teachers, and then she passed it down, and these individuals are not related either. And so you can see that then starting in the early 1900s, it wasn't always because of a family heritage. One of the other things that's a little bit interesting, though, is that often Pansori singers will start learning at a very young age. Lee Ju-eun actually started learning when she was 7, and obviously still sings today. And you can start later in life, but most those who really become professional singers do start quite early. All right, so there you have, again, Lee Ju-eun, Shin Young-hee, and Kim So-hee. All right. So as I said, at an early age, people begin learning by rote. And that is how many things are learned here. But again, where I'm the master, I have the sound, and I'm going to teach you how to sing it. So I'm going to play a couple examples here. And this is a group class that was trying to learn Pansori. And I will admit that we weren't very good. So here we go. So we repeat what this master sings. See, not quite so good. All right, so one of the other things that's to me really fascinating about Pansori, and one of the things my teacher told me from the very first time that we met together, and she was trying to teach me to sing, she said, there's a lot of nuance to Pansori. She said, there are sounds that you make, and if you don't sing it correctly, someone might not know what's missing, but they'll know something is missing. And something's just not quite right. And so she was trying to teach me how to move from one note to another. But what I had to do was to try to slide up to it. And it's a very quick note, but you have to do that slide correctly. So I'm going to play you this, and be warned that this was my very first Pansori lesson. So take it for what it is. So that's what it sounds like fast. But when you sing it, you have to practice like this. And then faster. Oh, not quite. So, not so good. It's still hard for me to do it. But what I want to do is then play a song in which you will hear that. And then you'll hear it's really fast. But again, if you don't have that whoop, whoop in it, it doesn't sound right. So here she goes. That's one time. She's going to do it again here. Get ready. Right. That's how fast it is. And so there's all sorts of shading, all sorts of coloring in the voice that's done there. And the way that that's done, traditionally, again, it's not so much anymore, is that you had this idea of losing the voice. I mentioned before that it's a very harsh and raspy sound to it. And that comes by actually creating calluses on your vocal cords, which, if you know anything about Western music, is the furthest thing from what you want to do. You go on vocal rest if you even begin to get a little raspy. But that's actually what a Pansori singer wants. They want this harsh, raspy sound to it. And they used to do that by going outside and singing in front of a waterfall or in the mountains and trying to outdo nature by the sound so that you could create this really big, rough, harsh sound. And that eventually, though, not only is it about creating a voice, a sound, but it's also creating a person and a being, and that's called dugum. And if you know anything about martial arts, you'll know that maybe a 10-year-old kid can physically do the motions of a black belt. But to really become a top black belt, it takes time, it takes meditation, it becomes mastering yourself, and that's what dugum is about. It's not just about the voice. It's about this idea of transcendence, of becoming more than just a singer. You embody this entire experience. And I remember one time Ijun being asked about a performance she was going to have, and did she really understand the story and all of the emotions? And she said, I had this song memorized when I was about 10 years old, and I thought that I understood it. But then in my 20s, when I experienced more of life, I understood more. And then she was performing again when she was about 40. And she said, now I have suffered. I've had loss in my life. I've had joy in my life. I've had love. She said, now I understand it much more. And so it's about life experience as well as about the sound. So this is from a very famous movie called Sopyeonjae. And if you haven't seen it, I suggest that you watch it. It's really very entertaining. It's about a Pansori singer. And so here she's quite young, and she is practicing with her brother and the man who is essentially her father, not her birth father, but nonetheless. Here we go. And the sound's very low on this. Can you hear how much he has that vibrato in there? And the kid can't get it. And exactly. Just get out of here. All right. And so then later, she, for reasons that I won't fully explain here, she now is alone and is, well, not quite alone. Her father's actually still alive, but he's near death. And she is out in the woods trying to master Pansori. And I can't remember how much of this clip that I have in here. I think this is the shorter one. But essentially what happens is her father's out there, and he has stolen a chicken. And the owner comes and just beats him and beats him. And in so doing, she just kind of cries out, trying to save her father. And he goes, that's it. That's the sound I've been trying to get you to make all of this time. And that really deep-seated Han, again, that pain and suffering, that's what you need to really sing Pansori. And then she goes out in the woods a second time and finally has mastered the voice. And so this is what it is. Okay, we'll just listen to it. So this high voice, it's very hard to make, but she's finally gotten that sound. But you really have to see the movie to understand what she has to go through to get to this voice. And so I suggest that you watch that. Sopyeonje. All right, so depending on the scene the singer presents, he, she should be able to employ the proper musical techniques possible to evoke the desired emotion in the audience's heart. To evoke the desired emotion is the primary principle in Pansori. So you notice that immediately, that emotion that has to be there. And just as an artist mixes colors on the palette, so the Pansori singer selects and combines rhythms, melodic modes, vocalizations to convey the characterizations, emotional context, mood, tone, and levels of artifice appropriate to the dramatic context of a given scene. So I'll play a couple different pieces here again, each of these expressing a different emotion. So we start with love, and so this comes again from the story of Chunyang. This is probably the most famous Pansori song and is sung out of Pansori context quite often. And so this is the two of them happily together. And this is Shin Young-hee, no, I'm sorry, Kim So-hee, the woman who I first heard. So again, notice that for the love song, it's pretty fast, keeps moving along. Again, the text is actually very clever. It's quite humorous. Okay, I'm going to go back and forth because some of the clips are a little long. We'll go to a little sorrow here. This is where Chunyang and Idoryong are now being separated. Listen to this note right here. It's called ritualized crying. It's where you are singing, but you imitate the way in which one would cry. And again, lament. It gets even a little harsher than sorrow. You can listen to the harshness here. Right here. That is the sound of lament. And then finally, again, I think this is the one I played before a little bit. So again, just fast, like, I want this, I want some food, I want some tobacco, I want some drink, I want this, I want that. All right. So Pansori, as I said, has existed for a long time, probably 300 years or so. Again, we don't really know the original beginnings of it. But there's a lot of modern renditions as well. How do we make Pansori more palatable to the youth of today? Well, traditional pansori is still sung, but there's a lot of new ways of doing it too. So there's a lot of new stories that people make up. Some are quite short, about 20 minutes long, and usually those are very humorous. But then there's also singers who will combine maybe traditional pansori, but with a jazz band or a rock band or a Western-style orchestra. And then there's other times, as I said, that you have a completely new text, but is sung in a traditional way. And so again, I'll play just a couple examples of this. Oops. Or maybe not. Let's see if this one works. So here we have Lee Jun again, but singing with an orchestra in the background. So this is traditional pansori. This comes from the tale of Shimcheong. This is where she is about to sacrifice herself. She throws herself into the ocean, right? There. So it's traditional pansori, but with an orchestral background. Imitating the sound of water there. So that's actually where she lands in the water. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself there. So that's one way to render pansori in a new way. Other ways is, as I said, you have completely new pansori, and we'll see if this video plays. Sometimes the sound and the picture get off a little bit, but this was a piece written specifically about the 2002 World Cup, and those of you who were in Korea at the time know this was a very big deal, and so it's about that. Okay, I don't think it's going to play. I'll see if sometimes I can get it to play if I just go to the piece itself, not in the PowerPoint. And then finally you have what is called Changguk, and that is a staged version of pansori, where the basic sounds are about the same, but they do it much more like a Western opera, where you may have a narrator, and then each character or each part is played by a different person. Because again, when I was talking about these stories before, and I was talking about, so we had Chunyang, and we had Ido-ryong, and we had these magistrates, and we had Chunyang's mother. And all of these people, all of these characters in a regular pansori tale are being sung by one person. And they have to somehow change a little bit their demeanor so that you can follow the story and know who is speaking at which time. But in Changguk, each person, so Ido-ryong is played by one person, and Chunyang is played by another, but the narrator often sings more traditional pansori, and so there's elaborate costumes and props, and so it's much more like a Western opera. And I think actually right now in Seoul, I think they're doing a version of Shimcheong at the National Theater. At least they were. It may be done by now. And again, I'll see if this will play. This is from Sugunga, and so we have here the underwater emperor and the tortoise and then the rabbit, and again they're trying to get the rabbit's liver. And so let's see if this will play or not. I apologize that some of the videos are not working. All right, I'll go back here and try in just a minute and show you them a little differently. But why do I love pansori? Well, because to me it just has everything. The emotional breadth that we talked about, all emotion, so much into it. All of the characters, whether it's an animal or a king or a young woman who's being beaten for being chaste. There's just so much. The stories are very well known, but they remain entertaining. You can go and listen to the same chunyanga being sung by 10 different people, and it'll be different every time, and there's something engaging about it. As I said before, there are these values that are taught. The performers themselves are remarkable people, and the performances that they give. It's music, it's storytelling, and it really is just a little bit of everything. If you remember, what is Pansori? Pansori. Pansori is Pansori. It's all of these things. And so hopefully this video will play, it should. This is at the end of her singing Humbuga, and she's been singing now for about 4 hours. She took about a 5-minute break, and otherwise this is the end of a 4-hour performance. So let's take a listen. And sorry, I was sitting on the front row, so it's a little bumpy. So as she prepares to sing this last note that she holds out for a long time, you mentioned before that she sings with her whole soul. So listen to this last note in just a moment. After 4 hours, again, of singing. So, pretty remarkable, in my opinion. All right, let me see here just a moment. If I can go back to my folder, and we can watch. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, let's see if we can open this separately. Yeah, the sound and video is off here. So that was the rally cry at the 2002 World Cup. And you can see instead of traditional hanbok, he's dressed as a soccer player. And it goes on here. But again, you can kind of see just this very modern sort of thing. Okay, let me now escape. Go. Nope. Maybe there. Okay, nope. Yes, and let me see if I can find the Changguk. Video 1, Sopinda mountain scene, Sugunga. Maybe. Nope. Sorry, Sopinda, we did mountain scene, World Cup. I don't know where it went. Maybe it's up front. Is it? No, Pansori 1, that's all that. We did that, we did that. Okay, well, don't know where the other one is. I apologize. So I guess the question is, I can talk for just about a few more minutes if you want to know a little bit more about modern Pansori, or I can end it there. Any preference? Okay, this is kind of entertaining, so let me go back and see if I can find, this will go here. And so again, I won't do this entire presentation, but not too long ago, and for 3 years, there was a battle, a one-night battle between hip-hop performers and Pansori singers. And so if you recall at the very beginning, one of the first clips I told you, I said, remember this sound. Do you remember how fast it was? And this kind of patter? Well, my humble estimation is that's kind of the beginning, the 300-year-old tradition of Korean rap. And of course, I know that it wasn't conceptualized as rap, but in terms of sound, there's a lot of similarities. So if you look at rappers, there's kind of different types of rapping in Korea. And that is that you have idol bands that contain a hip-hop singer. And I just realized this is probably all internet-based. Let me see if it'll play. Yeah, that's what I thought, that it's internet, so we won't play that. But some of these other videos should work. Oh, no, it is going to work. Okay. So this is some underground hip-hop singers who have incorporated traditional Korean music into it. But again, you can see that they're kind of using traditional beats, and there's a lot of reference to traditional music in this. I'm going to see if I can skip ahead. I don't know if it'll work or not. So this is MC Meta. He's really the grandfather of Korean hip-hop. He's probably one of the most important real underground hip-hop performers. But again, notice him performing with the fan. There's definitely these references to traditional music. We've got calligraphy in the background. This dancing is part traditional, part contemporary. What's that? It is good. Actually, this is done particularly well. All of these performers are really quite amazing.
I'd like to say to myself.
Yeah, you should look it up here. Okay, let's see. Nope, I want to stop. Okay, now I need to go back to here. Okay. So we did all of that. Okay, we need to escape and go back here so that we can stop. Yes?
In those videos, the people have masks, but in the original Pansori, they never use masks.
No, they didn't use masks in Pansori, but there is traditional mask dance. And so he's incorporating some of that traditional mask dance with the sort of Pansori-esque sound. It's not real Pansori either, but it's still using some of the voice techniques of traditional music. Okay, so again, sorry, I have to go back and forth a little bit here. So let's go back again. So in Korea, there's all sorts of singing competitions, and there's even some actual rap singing competitions, Show Me the Money, and Unpretty Rap Star, which is about female performers, which you may be aware of as well, and I won't go into that too much. And this is really fascinating to me, actually. This is called Hip-hop Minjok, or the Tribe of Hip-hop. And it's these 8 grandmas, halmoni or halme, and they are paired up with these younger hip-hop singers. And all of these women were actresses, or one was actually a traditional musician, but actresses. One woman is a aerobics instructor, and they do some great performances. Again, I'm going to show you a little bit of this if it will play. Let's see, I may have to be patient. Not very good at that. Okay, let's try again, see if it will go there. Okay. See if it's, oh yeah, I was afraid of that. Oh, and it was so good. It was just the best. So this grandma comes out, and she's wearing her little pink dishwashing gloves, and she's got an apron on, and she's like, my children, they just think I'm an ajima. I'm just good for cooking and cleaning the house. And one moment, excuse me. And so she comes out and she starts ripping off the gloves and the apron and starts rapping. And she's like, I'm more than that. I'm a modern, sexy woman. And anyway, it's very entertaining. All right, so let's go back here. My point for showing you this, then, is that, again,
Take us some rest.
yes. See, I can't rap for 2 hours straight. So this battle between hip-hop singers and Pansori singers. And I have to say that none of these are professionals, not the rappers and not the Pansori performers either. But the judges were really looking for the way that they express their wit, their humor, or specifically their dissing of the other performers, and kind of the rhythm and the beat. And so the rappers were good with the beat for the most part, of freestyling about their dissing. But as to be expected, the Sorigun or Pansori singers were good at their audience rapport, their improvisation and characterization. The judges, I'd mentioned before, MC Mehta, who we just listened to, Colleen Park, who you might be familiar with. She is a producer. She has starred in some things herself. She studied Korean traditional music. And then Won Il, who was also, he's a conductor of a Korean orchestra, but it's Korean instruments, but essentially set up like a Western-style orchestra. There are 16 competitors, 8 rappers and 8 Pansori singers. And they each have 2 segments, one where they're supposed to rap to a hip-hop beat, and then where they're also supposed to rap to a traditional changdan that I talked about, one of these traditional beats that's used in Pansori. Although, as I will point out in a moment, the beats aren't actually Pansori beats. All right, so hopefully this will play now. So this is this guy Kang Eun-min, and he is rapping now to, he's rapping to a rap beat. So let's see how he does. But he's obviously the Pansori singer, as you will see by the way he's dressed. Okay, so we actually start out with the rapper. Sorry. I'm just going to try. Nope. Turn the sound back up a little bit again. Somewhere in between. Okay. Now we'll go back again. So you can see this Pansori singer over there trying to be really cool, moving to the beat, but not necessarily doing a great job of it.
자, 좋습니다. 자, 2초를 남겨두고 끝내고, 자, 다음은 강은민 판소리 시작합니다.
Okay, so now
내가 처음으로 마음에 드는 여자는 어떻게에서 만났지? 그 여자가 하는 말 혹시 저기 뭐 하세요? 아, 예, 저 판소리입니다. 판소리란 말을 듣더니 말을
So he's singing about Pansori, and what is Pansori? What's the sound of it? It goes like this. And now he's singing that famous love song.
자, 잘 끝났습니다. 자, 뜨거운 대결인데 바로 국악 베이스로 넘어오죠. 힌트 주세요.
Okay, but now they get a traditional beat and have to do the same thing. So he's actually pretty good at keeping with the beat. A lot of them aren't. Both the Pansori singers and the rappers do not get the gukak beat at all.
자, 숨이 굉장히 찰 것 같은데, 자, 이에 맞서서 어떤 소리를 들을지 소리꾼 강흥민. 아니 뭐라는 거야? 왔네 내가 왔네 내 눈물 내 판소리 무대에.
So I've come here to sing Pansori on this stage.
말을 들어봐 내 나이 올해 29 아홉수 소년이라는디 나도 어째 청춘인지 한 달이.
But he's actually off the beat quite a bit.
여기 오신 여러분 중에 29 계시오. 29 남자는 손 내려.
But again, trying to, be cool. Give it up, give it up.
나 이제 계란판이야. 자, 시간이 끝났습니다. 두분께 다시 한번 박수를.
So ultimately, then the judges, there's some things they like about it, but then say, but you didn't actually like with Kang Eun-min, he used too much pansori. He's supposed to be improvising, and he doesn't do so. So he makes it to the second round, though, well, why not? I'll show you a little bit of it, because Lina ends up really dissing him, and that's kind of the important part here. So he now is going to show his bling, once again, he's in his hanbok, but he's got the big necklace, he's got his bling, he's going on.
사진을 보다가 한쪽을 찢었어 시그머리처럼 한쪽을 찢었어 소리
And here he's talking about, you know, that he can sing as a singer, but he can rap as a rapper. He can do it all.
아이고 좋아 죽겠다 1년 365일 그저 꾸역꾸역 나오느라 자 다음 대결은
Okay, now Lina to her gukak beat. Her
각별적성이 무거우니 힘차게 걷어차 널 묶어오니 잠깐 대중들의 눈 피할 수 있을까 네 구겨진 힘 끊겨버린 네 앞을 좀 어지게 말만 하니까 정리전하니 머리 위로 물어봐 무심되게 쉬우니 오늘 하만 언제마다 크크크크 이건 실수동안 실패하냐 슬금슬금 기어다닌 도로 주발처럼 떨리니까 알아 몰랐으니 어리숙한 내 세포 하나 한잔 더 떠올려봐 듣기 쉬운 세상 이런 꿈나무 21세기 초원 어디는 개파 정신이 없어 아니 밤중에 홍두깨 손바닥 위에 어려지니 운명은 완전 묘하다 소리 질러
자 좋습니다 바로 박격원 이어집니다 그만 두 분 다 한 거예요? 와 언제 했어요? 했어요? 와 내가 진짜 정수를 팔고 있구나 음악에 너무 빠져있다 보면 이런 실수를 해요 계속 보고 싶은 마음이 어떤 거지 끊임없이 자 좋습니다 자 수혜사 얘기해 주시죠
So, okay, now these are the judges talking about it, and I'll tell you a little bit more about this in a moment. So this again is MC Meta.
스타일 멋있는데요? 스웩
So you liked his swag, you liked his bling.
첫 번째 무대에서 그 힙합 비트에서 이제 뭔가 소리를 하시는데 약간 랩처럼 하시려는 게 재밌기도 했지만 한편으로는 조금 아쉬운 것도 있어요.
So it was good, but it's just lacking something. And then Lina.
린다 씨도 굉장히 그 기본적으로 가지고 계신 게 되게 좋으신 것 같아요. 되게 가사도 잘.
So it's like, you're good, but you've got something yet to learn. And this is Colleen Park. Yeah, I probably recognize her face. She's
우리 랩하시는 분은 무르익으며 지금 마치 새로 시작하신 분 같아요. 나이가 많고 할 내용이 많을 때 좋을 것 같습니다. 잘 들었습니다.
no, again saying kind of the same thing, that she's good, but with more time and age and experience, she'll do better.
버벅대고, 근데 이후에서 좀 많이 들었고요. 우리 강은미 씨는 좋은 점을 크게 갖고 있는데 소리를 구성하는 힘이 너무 마구잡이식이라 그럴까요? 막말을 하면 제가 그런 게 좀 있어서 좀 정돈됐으면 좋겠다는 생각이 들었습니다.
So kind of what's interesting about this
이제 그럼
is that, so again, they talk about these different things, and what's important here is that MC Meta says that the rapper should learn from the Sorigun, especially about this idea of mat. And mat is an aesthetic in Korean music, well, Korean art in general. It really literally means like taste. But it's when you have good mat, you have the aesthetic, you really understand how the art is supposed to be performed. And Colleen Park in general talks about the idea of the focus on the lyrics and following the groove is important, but also to play with the audience. And then Won Il talks about this is a world cultural heritage, and that Pansori really needs to open itself up to the world, and that's why a performance like this is so important, because it can tie this very traditional world and this very modern world together. But also one of the things that I wanted to mention that was interesting is Lina there, she really disses the Pansori performer. And then when the MC comes out, he's like, is that all? You know, don't you have something else you want to say to her? He really wanted the Pansori singer to come back and have some sort of comeback, and he was just kind of dead. It was not all that interesting then. But again, here, and one of the reasons that he should have done that, he should have shown her more of who he was because one really wants rappers and DJs to learn Pansori to ultimately create this idea of uri joking, which literally is our style. But he wants Pansori and he wants hip hop both to be modern, but to combine one another and to learn from one another. So again, as I said, I know that Pansori was never conceptualized as rap, but it lends itself very well, particularly to this idea of storytelling, to the improvisation, to this patter, what is it? Hang on. Suldomoko, saldomoko. Anyhow, like that really fast Pansori singing. And that in the past, that Pansori was about mocking the aristocracy. And that rap does a lot of that same thing. The audience participation, the gestures, the emotions, the characterization, all of that. So I'm going to show you one last bit here. And this is, again, kind of what you can do when these things are combined. And this isn't, the Pansori singer isn't actually singing Pansori. He'll end up singing a folk song, but so I got a little beatbox going here. So it's pretty interesting, some of the things that are done. And, you would never find someone like my teacher singing this. But, again, I thought I was going to make it. Almost. Oh, it's fine. But I think that there's a real reason for doing this is trying to bring these worlds together, trying to promote both Pansori as a tradition, but also saying that it has a place in the modern world, and that the hope of a lot of these performers is that by performing on a stage like this, that it will bring people also to the traditional performances so that they can go and listen to the story of Chunyang and hear what Pansori is really about. And so it's about authenticity, it's about showing legitimacy and showing what Pansori can be in the future. And ultimately, it's again what one il called is urikot. It's about our thing. And so our thing for today is Pansori, and that is what I have to say. So thank you very much for being here. Okay. Yes, if you have questions, please. I have water, so I can still go a while.
I have one question.
Yes.
Why you think, or people think it's 300, 200 years old? Why can't it be 1,000 years old, Pansori? You don't know.
Right. Exactly. It could be. So, I mean, the shamans have been singing for ages, but or for hundreds of years. But basically, we have an idea of when the stories themselves started to develop, and when this type of singing started to develop. And as I said, then in the 1700s or so, we begin having records of it. But you're right, we don't really know. It could have been going on in a similar type of form, but really it's probably in the late 1600s would be my guess, mid to late 1600s, where the genre, as it would be recognizable today, begins to exist. But you're right, we don't exactly know. So, yeah. I'm happy to go back in time, at least temporarily. I like conveniences, I like heat, air conditioning, those sorts of things. But I'd still really wish I could view back in time and see what this was like a few hundred years ago. Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes.
I was late. Well, when it comes down to the Pansori, the UNESCO designated Pansori as a kind of an epic, what is the main essence of Pansori, which was proclaimed by UNESCO?
Right.
One question.
Mm-hmm.
Number two question, when you're talking about Pansori or Sanjo, whatever, Korean kind of a chant or a song is basically is a solo, meant for solo singer, or you can make it harmony. And another question.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
I just, a long time ago, I remember reading a small article about Pansori, which can be connected with the kind of therapeutic music, kind of, because it's a narrative storytelling,
Right.
interactive. Why? This is kind of creative Pansori, something like that, but it's not the Changdak.
Right.
Can you explain about? I think maybe you can make it worldwide, cross-cultural kind of. How can I put it? Maybe we can put it in global way, cross-cultural ways.
Right.
That's a good idea. It's a self-expressing dialogue. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Without scenario, maybe.
Uh-huh.
If I'm a patient,
Right. Right.
is it possible?
Okay, let's see if I can answer those questions. So first of all, for UNESCO, it was in fact designated as a World Heritage. So I said that in Korea there is the intangible property, 문화재, so intangible cultural properties. And right, 문화, or 문화. Yeah, there it is, you got it. And so Korea first designated that in 1963, and as I said, Kim So-hee was the first Pansori singer designated. But then also in, I think it was 2004, UNESCO then accepted it as a World Heritage. And the reason being then is to basically let the world know that this is a unique art form. And right, and so as they call it then this epic storytelling.
Yeah.
And
epic storytelling means what?
so epic,
It's not the rhythm or melody or.
no, it's again because it's a combination of many things. It's epic because it is long. It's also epic because it is large. It incorporates lots of different things, and it is epic in that it incorporates so much in terms of storytelling, singing, and the actions and the drummer, all of that together.
There's no musical element in it, no?
Not well.
Pure sense, I mean, okay.
I mean, in a Pansori performance, absolutely. If you sing saranga, it always has basically that melody.
Yeah, melody.
Right, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is only one melody. It's everything combined together for UNESCO. The second, well, let me go to the third one.
Harmony.
Right, okay, so harmony. If I had easier access to the internet, I won't play you this, but Korea traditionally has no harmony.
Yeah.
Right, in court music, you may have an entire orchestra that has a hagum, a kayagum, the pyong, all sorts of different instruments, but they are all playing basically the same melody.
Unison. Yeah.
Right.
Unison, am I correct?
It's a little different. It's actually what we call heterophonic, and hetero means many.
Hetero?
Hetero. And so many sounds, and it's heterophonic because they are all playing the same melody, but maybe a flute can make, so the note is ah, but a flute can make a little twirl, ah, or ah, and a kayagum, when you pluck the note, is going to play ah, but then you can go ah, you can bend the note. And so each of those instruments is playing essentially the same note, but according to its own particular characteristics. And so that is heterophonic, but it's still the same. It's not harmony in a Western sense. If you listen to Beethoven's symphony, you hear harmony, and it's not that. And so Pansori is, even when it's changguk, even when it's done as the opera setting, it's not done with harmony. You now may have an orchestra playing Western style harmony, but the singers themselves almost never sing harmony. Okay, the third part, can it be therapeutic? Yeah. Probably. Lots of musics can. I think a lot of non-Koreans might find the sound very harsh and disturbing more than relaxing. But I will tell you that there is a professor in the United States. Her name is Chan Park. Park Chang-eun. And she's at the University of Ohio, and she performs Pansori. She does all of their narration in English, and then she does the chang, or the singing, in Korean. So she keeps the chang very traditional, but in presenting it to a world audience, she does all of the storytelling, all of the narrative parts in English, and it's brilliant. And so I think more people are experimenting with how can we bring this to a world audience, and that's one way that Chan Park has chosen to do that.
Thank you so much.
Yes?
Sorry, could you eventually give us once more like an example of saranga or anything?
I appreciate the applause, but I actually have to say that, and it's really embarrassing, but I have not practiced for like 7 years. And so my 30 seconds that I gave you before, that's kind of all I can do on the spot. And so I apologize, like my saranga, all of that. Hang on, let me think. All right, I may be able, again, this is going to be like 30 seconds. At one point in Chunyanga, and I don't know if I'm going to remember the lyrics or not, really, it's been years since I've sung this, but one of the famous parts is after Chunyang has been in prison, and she's just lamenting that Idoryong is up in Seoul, and she's very sad. And so she sings this. It's called Kalkabuddha, and again is very famous, but I have no idea if I have a voice or the lyrics. Let's find out. It goes something like this. Kalkabuddha, kalkabune ni mo tara I'm going to stop there. It goes on. It's like a 10-minute song, and that's, the 10 seconds of it. Sorry. It goes up quite high there, and I knew my voice was not going to make it. Yes?
Thank you so much for the short presentation. I mean, like, of your singing.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Actually, it's not maybe really a question, but it's more of a comment. I think it was last week I went to the 60th anniversary of Melodic Kim Dok-soo
Yes.
concert.
Yes.
And I was literally shocked to see that, I saw that the main audience was mostly elderly, an audience, I would say, older than me. But the problem was that the tsuimse was completely missing. And
Right.
the only thing that we could hear eventually were maybe a few youngsters who were like screaming.
Right, but it's not tuimse in the same way.
And I was really shocked that Kim Dok-soo himself, he had to instruct Koreans
Right.
what is tsuimse, telling them you have to say 좋다 and 일시고 and stuff.
Right.
And still afterwards, just a few people said that. So why do you think is this kind of development happening? Because I remember, like many years back, I'm from Germany. I saw someone maybe in the 1980, I don't know, 7 or something, in Ambassador's house, and there I heard all the Koreans say, "Ugh."
Right.
And I
Yeah.
was like, no, what is that? But now I didn't hear anyone. Why do you think is this happening? Or
I can't really say why. I think a few things are happening. It's becoming a lost art in many ways, even though there are still performers studying it, and you still do again have this national preservation of the art. But to be honest, the younger generation isn't necessarily going out there and listening to it. But as you said, with an older audience, like they should know. That's the generation. But even those that are, say, in their 40 and younger or so, really are not going out to these performances, and it's not part of the school curriculum anymore. And they used to be taken to to the various national centers for traditional music, and they're not so much anymore. And so I think people are just not as familiar with it. And that they're now, like, if you listen to any sort of K-pop, and you listen to the television, there's a very set way of screaming, like, whoo! And there's like, I thought that it was just always canned, meaning that it was pre-recorded. But I sang for one of my classes one time, and it was an undergraduate class, and they all made the same cheer simultaneously. And so it's almost like that has become the learned art, is cheering in that sort of way. But there's really a loss of this tuimse, as you mentioned, and as you said, Kim Dok-soo, that was one of the founders of Samonori. And so he's trying to teach these audiences. I mentioned before at the beginning when I showed the drummer, and he'll stop the audience and say, no, this is where you say chota, this is where you say oshigo. And some people still do it, but again, I can't say the reason why, but it certainly is happening that way. And I think is certainly a pity that and people don't necessarily want to sit through the longer Pansori performances anymore. So not even, like 2 hours, let alone the 4 hours. But they're still being performed. They're still out there. You can still go. Please do. So
encouraging the other people to join together.
Well, that's the thing. Actually, I'll tell you one reason why I think it has changed, and this is two things that happened with the introduction of the Munwaje system. Pansori lost its improvisation, and the reason is because if Ijun wants to become the next holder of the intangible property, she has to sing Chunyang the way that Shin Shin Young-hee sang it, which is the way that Kim So-hee sang it. And so there's some really great things about this government making the preservation. But they took away one of the primary things, and that was improvisation. And that's true whether you're talking about sanjo or any other thing. It's like it has to be exact. And so there's not as much freedom anymore. But the other thing that did was these performances were meant to be in this sort of situation. We were supposed to be close. I was supposed to be looking at you, and you're crying with me, you're laughing with me. That is how Pansori should be performed. But now what we've done is we've taken the audience away, we've put the performer on a stage, and they are separated from the audience. And I think that has a tremendous effect, that really you've got to be up there. It's meant to be interactive, and that's no longer there. Yes, please.
So if the singers don't really improvise anymore, how much does the gosu improvise? Do they have more freedom?
The gosu definitely improvises a lot more. And the gosu there is encouraging and trying to keep them going on. And, you know, a good, well, there's a saying that it basically translates as 2 Pansori singers for 1 gosu, meaning that the gosu is really more important. You can have, anybody can be a singer, but to be a good gosu, that's really important. And because they're the ones in many ways that keep the music going. And so you will get more improvisation for them. And as I said, they'll never play the rhythm straight, like, you know, here's Jung Jung Mori over and over and over. I mean, they'll play according to the music and keep it moving. And so a little bit more. There is some improvisation. I won't say it's dead altogether, but it's certainly not the way, again, that it probably was 100, 200 years ago. Anything else? I know I've kept you a long time here. Yes, please.
Just an observation. You said, to practice the very low bass voice,
Mm-hmm.
to actually go in nature and like trying to reference themselves.
Right.
It's interesting that because last year I went to some Korean pottery exhibitions.
Mm.
So the pottery is also like the more rough, the more crude it is.
Right.
The more maybe closer to nature or something. I found it interesting that the Korean culture is so much about like I don't know what to call it.
Right. Well, it's that idea of Han, that's that suffering and all. And actually, the whole reason that my study came about as it did in 1997, I think it was, or 98, I was attending a traditional music school for foreigners just for the summer. And a professor said, just kind of as an offhanded remark, he said, most Korean folk music used to be very rough, all of it did. Something like the ajeng, which is a stringed instrument, used to be played with a wooden stick, and now it's played with like a cello bow. And he said, a lot of the traditional folk music is not as rough as it used to be. And then he said an important thing. He said, I wonder if that's because in the past, life for the Korean folk was very, very harsh. It was difficult, and that sound was a way of releasing that. It was a catharsis. And now life is much easier, and maybe that is why the sound is changing also. And so that's actually what I ended up studying. I studied specifically the idea of the harshness of Pansori and the idea of that pain and suffering, because I wanted to know if it was still there. Can you really hear that suffering in the voice? And so some of those examples that I played were all clips where I thought you can really hear that ritualized crying, you can hear that. But he also, that other professor, also equated the difference of like the brown kimchi pots and the roughness and harshness of that kind of pottery compared to the smoothness of the elite celadon, and saying everything about Korean life for the folk was that harshness. And so you're right, you know, the pottery, the poetry, the sung poetry, in folk music, a lot of that harshness is there. And that, if not harshness of sound, at least the emotion being very poignant. Right, yeah, there's one that not the ajin, the komengo, and you hit it with a stick. And so that too, that creates a very harsh sound. Yes, so thank you. 오케이, 좋다, 으시고. 좋다, 좋다. Again, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.